Hello and welcome to the show. Now, if the standard McLaren P1 is just not quite fast enough for you, there is the option to go for the P1 GTR. More power, more downforce, considerably faster car around a track. And likewise, Ferrari will do a similar thing. With the LaFerrari, you can go for the FXX. Again, over 1,000 horsepower in that car. Tremendous brakes and plenty of downforce to go with it. Or you go with the crazy Swedes and the Koenigsegg 1.1. Incredible top speed, over 1,300 horsepower in that car. The question is, with these three, which one would come out on top in a showdown? Naturally, the best place to start would be with a race at the Yas Marina circuit. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the Koenigsegg would get to turn 1 first despite a relatively short run to the first corner. The 1.1 has got some truly incredible acceleration. However, when it comes to the corners, the Ferrari is right there trying to fight for the lead immediately. And I know I've got to go quite defensive in this opening section to try and fend off that Ferrari. In the end, slightly runs out of space on the inside, has to bail as we come towards the hairpin. The McLaren is right there. My Koenigsegg gets a little bit of a twitch. The Ferrari has not quite got anywhere to go. And now we come to this long straight, and the 1.1 is gone. The McLaren and Ferrari relatively even matched in terms of straight line speed. The Ferrari was a little compromised on the run out of the hairpin, allows the McLaren to get to the inside, dives and parks it pretty much perfectly on the apex. Ferrari hasn't really got anywhere to go through this next section. Once more to the second long straight here. The 1.1 is vanishing off in the distance. Ferrari is keeping pace very much with the McLaren. They come to dive under brakes. Ferrari switches sides, and this is where the FXX is so strong. The brakes on this car are absolutely incredible. It gets stopped so quickly. The McLaren just can't deal with it. And when it comes to these slower corners, equally, the McLaren just simply can't keep up. These cars were side by side at the end of the straight. You can see the size of the gap the Ferrari has already got, and the rather shrinking gap that I had at the front of this field. Because when it comes to the corners, the 1.1 just cannot live with the Ferrari. The Ferrari can carry so much more speed, a big slide from the FXX. Now, I did have the 1.1 running on race tyres. The standard car would come with road legal tyres, whereas the other two cars would be running on racing slicks. For the sake of fairness, I did have the 1.1 on the racing tyres. Even so, that was nowhere near enough to really compete with the Ferrari. I get a big wiggle on the curb. The Ferrari has to bail out and go to the outside. Actual initial drive off of a corner, the Ferrari was very good. It had that little bit better traction perhaps than the 1.1, but once you got the power down in this Koenigsegg, it was gone. It was absolutely gone, and there was nothing the Ferrari could do about it. And likewise, the McLaren didn't have an answer. So I had to make the most of the strengths with this car. I had to try and make the most of these long straights here to try and get myself as big a lead as possible in the hope that I could stay ahead of the Ferrari. But it was becoming increasingly difficult as the race progressed, because the Ferrari could just put his car, if he wanted to go around the outside of me, he could. If he wanted to go out the inside of me, have a big dive under brakes, he could. My sole weapon in this fight was the acceleration, was the straight line speed. Admittedly, that made things a tiny bit easier for me in terms of defending, because anywhere where there was even a short straight section, I could out-accelerate the Ferrari and I could keep parking my car on the inside of just about every corner. But that was only going to be able to last for so long, as again I have to defend heavily into turn 1. The Ferrari can just carry the speed, cut back to the inside on the exit as we run up towards turn 2. I don't have the grip to hold it around the outside. The Ferrari would take the lead, and interestingly, despite us fighting this hard for the lead, the McLaren couldn't catch up. Despite us fairly compromising each other at stages around here, the McLaren simply couldn't keep up with these cars around a track. At this stage, I wasn't too worried. I'd actually stayed relatively close to the Ferrari through this twistier section, and we know what's coming up next. The 1.1, if you're within a couple of 100 feet of the 1.1, you're not going to fend it off coming down this straight. And sure enough, while the Ferrari did get a good run down this section, it was never going to be enough to hold off my car. parking the 1-1 in the middle of the road, go very, very defensive once more, make sure to almost stop it on the apex, make it very difficult for the Ferrari to carry momentum through these sections, where the Ferrari is so very strong, and again, run away from it when it came to the straight. The poor McLaren, could keep up with the 1-1 in terms of corner speed, but gets absolutely demolished by it whenever it came to a straight or any acceleration zone, and the McLaren could just about keep up with the Ferrari in a straight line, but come to a corner, and the Ferrari demolishes the McLaren, so it was just a little bit outclassed. It's just about within camera shot at this stage. It couldn't keep up with these two vehicles. I had got, once again, a nice little gap after the two straights, but it was always going to be tough to hold off that Ferrari. Again, I'm trying to park the 1-1, make it as awkward for the Ferrari as I could, but at the end of the day, that FXX had too much grip. It would fire himself up the inside. Nothing I could do about that one. If I'd gone more defensive, I think it just would have gone around the outside of me. My last hope was a mistake from the Ferrari at the final corner and to outrun it towards the line. Both of us actually overdrive that corner. I get the power down, but it's not enough. Ferrari would claim victory from my coincide with the McLaren. A little bit of a distant third. Been a very, very good fun race, that one. The thing is, with cars like these, you're kind of unlikely to have a racetrack to yourself. So what happens when we go for a little bit of a track day? We would take our 3 hypercars to the Silverstone International Circuit with a bunch of other vehicles, driving around and see who could set the fastest lap, because this would not just be about the our own vehicle performance. It would also come in sort of traffic management. You'd have to find the best places to get past, the best places that you wouldn't lose too much lap time in overtaking vehicles, and to try and be as compromised as little as possible. It's a slightly different challenge. You have to think a little bit more about road positioning, etc. Of course, the cars that we're going to be up against were, never going to stand a hope in hell, really, of keeping up with these racing vehicles. But it was, instances like this, for example, with the Ferrari having to dive up the inside of a Cayman. The Ferrari is catching it so absurdly fast in the braking zone. He has to go for the inside, but he has to take a little bit of a tighter line, and that's going to slightly compromise your overall lap time. You really wanted to be catching the cars either on a straight or in a fairly sizable braking zone where you could just easily outbrake them and not be affected too much. Of course, the strength of the 1-1, it's absolutely absurd straight line speed, meant I wanted to have all of my traffic on any of the straights. But it didn't have to be this main one either. I'd take it on the short straights, although when it's just on the exit of a corner, this is where I have a little bit of difficulty. I can't get turned in the same way that the Ferrari can. And while you see there, I get out of the way and get past the MX-5, no problem, it was just I couldn't quite get to full throttle as soon as I wanted to. I couldn't turn the car to the inside of the MX-5, not in the same way that the Ferrari could. Well, I could out-accelerate stuff that little bit easier. And another thing that you had to do is when you did get that clear lap, you had to get it right. Me and the McLaren were running relatively closely on track, and at one stage, in the early part of the 10 minutes we had to go to set our lap time, we found ourselves in this lovely bit of clean air. And this was the point where you had to make it count, when there were as fewer cars around you. So the pressure really was on, and if you had a very unforgiving car and you couldn't quite get that lap time out when it was really, really necessary, then that could potentially cost you. There was a standard McLaren P1 racing around, and now you see the difference in performance between that and the FXX. It is stupendously fast, the Ferrari. The McLaren actually does a pretty good job keeping up in terms of straight line speed, but it's through the corners where the FXX absolutely flies. Even getting things a little bit wrong in turn 1, it still can pull a huge margin on the McLaren. But again, we see, that big outbraking manoeuvre just sort of overcommitted a little bit, would slightly cost that lap time. Now for the 1-1, I did actually catch up to the back of the P1 GTR. Had to bail out as I was running out of fuel. About 7 minutes into this, we had drained most of the tank. It wasn't quite empty. I could probably have gone for another lap, but I didn't want to risk it. So we had to come in for some new fuel Also, the tyres, the rate that we were pushing these cars, the tyres were actually starting to wear as well. So, yeah, the 1-1 was forced to make a pit stop. Its fuel, as ever, an interesting factor. The Ferrari was still having some fun with the traffic as it comes soaring down this back straight. Again, we're seeing the similar things. Yeah, the Ferrari, you can have big dives, outbrake these cars and easily out-accelerate them and whatnot, but there is so much traffic around. He too bails out as it comes in for some new tyres. The Ferrari was killing them, and there was also the slight hope that if you dive into the pits, you might be able to come out in a little bit cleaner air. The McLaren was equally starting to have trouble with some traffic. A Mustang was very sideways, soars past the Sierra Cosworths. Amusingly, the Mustang was almost as fast as the P1 in terms of straight line speed. The McLaren ending up getting stuck on the outside through that particular corner. There's a Camaro to dodge. There's all sorts of traffic, and this is, not helping you in terms of lap times. Now we've got an Alfa Romeo. This lap very much gone for poor McLaren. Yeah, it'll get around the outside, no problem, of the Alfa, and we'll go chasing after that Mustang once more. But when you come across that sort of larger group of traffic, you do what you can. McLaren would then soar past the Mustang as well through the corners. You just got to know that that lap's not going to work out, and you are better to kind of hold off and go again next time out. Refueled and retired, I was absolutely flying with the 1-1. Unfortunately, I had a really annoying habit of catching traffic at the worst possible time. This final section was so difficult to get past the vehicles ahead of you, especially when I had a car that I simply couldn't turn into the corners as well. In this particular instance, the Ferrari would have just dove to the inside and past the Subaru. I couldn't do that. I couldn't get my car quite to the places where I wanted it to. So if I wasn't able to blast past cars in a straight line, it made things that little bit more awkward for the 1-1, but still able, of course, to be getting lap times. As we were starting to run towards the end of the 10 minutes here, we were pushing the cars a little bit harder, and we're having a little bit more issues. Once more, the Ferrari diving to the inside of a Porsche, but on a slightly wonky line, manages to outbrake himself. That lap already fairly gone. It's not helped by the Sierra. I think the Sierra got up on two wheels across the curb and then couldn't stop it before the tyre bundle, and the Ferrari ran out of space, and that is one of the dangers of this kind of a challenge. You certainly did have to drive thoughtfully in places. I was once again trying to go for another lap. This was right towards the end of the time. I was up with the McLaren P1 as we head towards my favourite section of them all, where there was about four of us. I think the FXX was trying to back out and keep himself out of trouble, find some space for a final run. He has to give up on it in the end. And, while it doesn't look like much, that was enough to cost me some lap time in the end. I couldn't go quicker on that one around. We'd found our gaps early on in the traffic to set our time, and we could really go quicker towards the end. The results would be kind of as expected. The FXX would take victory at 1 minute 0.3 lap time. The Koenigsegg is a little bit further back. I was going quicker slightly on some of the later laps, although got stuck in traffic. Although I think a similar thing could be said for pretty much everyone here. I just couldn't get the lap time together with the 1-1. The P1 GTR was 1 minute 1.6, and perhaps this track not also quite so suiting the 1-1, less in the way of straights. So, with the racing out of the way, it was on to a hot lap competition around the Top Gear test track, and once more the results are kind of as expected. The FXX would top the table at 105.6 ahead of the Koenigsegg 1-1, a 106.0. McLaren P1 in third, a second down on that 1-1. I actually expected the FXX to be perhaps a little bit further ahead of the 1-1 around a circuit like this. Yes, there are some big acceleration zones, and that is where the 1-1 is going to make up its time. But of course, some of these slower corners, that Ferrari is so very mighty through. I think I might actually not quite be getting the very most out of the FXX. Trying to get the most out of the brakes on this car are a little bit difficult because they are so much better than just about everything else here that, yeah, trying to really push it. Perhaps there are a couple more tenths in that Ferrari. But, yeah, so far, when it comes to going around a circuit, the Ferrari is very, very dominant. However, what about a drag race? Now, not just between the vehicles. You see, you have cars like these, chances are people are going to want to race you. So we set up a little drag racing competition between the 3 hypercars against various modified vehicles. The McLaren went first against a Tesla, and the Tesla absolutely flew offline. This is an S-Class Tesla as well, by the way. The McLaren does start reeling it back in towards the end of the race, but the Tesla's launch would be enough to see it victorious. I would go up against a Chevelle, and the Chevelle wouldn't quite stand a chance against the 1-1. This thing is mighty fast. You saw it demolish the other 2 hypercars here. Yeah, the Chevelle wasn't quite likely to be able to do much there. The FXXK almost has a little bit of a scare against the Beetle. Beetle gets off the line better than the Ferrari, but once the Ferrari has got going, the Volkswagen is not quite able to keep up to it, and the Ferrari would take a relatively comfortable victory. Fresh from the embarrassment of losing to a Tesla, McLaren would then face off against a Subaru, and the Subaru would be off. And unlike the Tesla, where the McLaren did start catching it towards the end, nope, the Impreza was rather well gone here. Yes, I know these race cars are designed for cornering, designed for downforce, and so on, but it was interesting to see just how quick they were compared to these other vehicles. Now, I went up against a Ferrari 250 LM. This was one hell of a close race between these 2 cars. The Ferrari just managing to get it at the end. They can't get stopped, mind, after we cross the finish line. That is a mighty powerful 250 LM. The 1-1 is it's by half a car length at that. That's a damn close finish over that distance. With vehicles that are this powerful, I suspect the 250 LM with a 1,200 horsepower V12 in it, and yeah, incredibly light car. That was, yeah, seriously close. The FXXK fighting against a Lancia Delta S4, and the Delta's off. The Delta is very much off in this one. I mean, the Ferrari is not a slow car, but when you put these up against other, you know, quick vehicles, Bugatti Veyron Supersports is going to bugger off as well for the McLaren. The poor McLaren was not having the best of times when it came to these. It would actually equalise a little bit better with the Veyron after the 4-wheel drive launch is gone, but still the Veyron was pulling. I was getting the really high-powered rear-wheel drive cars in all of this. Carrera GT, I know these things get about 1,300 horsepower. I stay with it for the first quarter of a mile, but once it starts going, that Porsche, a little bit too much for the poor 1-1. The Ferrari next against a Celine S7. I know these things are mighty fast. Celine actually struggling with launch, wiggling and weaving all over the road, and then that buggers off as well. That's yeah, that's a little bit gone from the Celine there. McLaren up next against a Porsche, and once more Porsche would get a good launch. This one, though, not quite as big, considering how far the Impreza managed to get away from the McLaren. It did a little bit better up against the Porsche. My 1-1 was fighting against a Noble next, and the Noble was just that little bit too fast. I suspected the FXXK and the McLaren to struggle a little bit against these, you know, high-performance cars built for drag racing. I really thought the 1-1 might give a lot more of them a scare. It got closest, and of the 3 cars, yeah, the 1-1 was closest to keeping up with some of the crazy modified cars. But even that was struggling to compete in all of this. And to finish off, the Ferrari was up against a high-powered R8, and that absolutely buggered off. You can barely see it in the distance. Yeah, Audi a little too fast. These very expensive cars, slightly embarrassed by the competition there. As I said, it was perhaps the 1-1 being beaten so easily that was a little bit of a surprise there. For our final little test, decided to go for a 0 to 200 to 0. Normally do 0 to 100 to 0. This time, thought we'd go for that little bit higher speed, having to head to Le Mans for the little bit extra space that we can get on the straight. The Ferrari would go and set a benchmark for the rest of us to beat. The McLaren would go next. We're expecting it to be pretty close between the McLaren and the Ferrari. They have been fairly similar in terms of straight line speed. However, in this test, yeah, the Ferrari would take it. The McLaren actually going on the brakes not that much earlier than the Ferrari had got stopped. Although this section, well, it was always likely to be a strong point for the 1-1 because of its crazy acceleration. It was going to come down to just how good are the brakes on this vehicle, and the answer, very, very good indeed. You might be able to see the cars up the road in the distance there. It was 1,100 feet. This got stopped quicker than the Ferrari, and the McLaren was 300 feet later than the Ferrari, so quite convincing, I would say, that one from the 1-1. So in terms of conclusions, I don't really need to bother with a points table on this showdown. The McLaren, the P1 GTR, is don't get me wrong, a very, very quick car. But against these two, it doesn't stand a chance. Around the course of a lap, yes, through the twistier sections, the P1 will keep up with the 1-1. But as soon as there is any acceleration, any straights, the 1-1 is so blindingly fast that over the course of a lap, the P1 simply isn't able to keep up. And likewise, in terms of straight line speed, the P1 and the FXX are fairly similar. However, through the corners, the Ferrari is just so superior. Again, you saw the size of the gap that it could pull in Yas Marina just through a couple of corners. The P1 is just simply not quite quick enough to fight with these two cars. When it comes to a track, the Ferrari would be the victor. The Ferrari is the quicker car around a circuit. Yes, I gave the FXXK some worries at Yas Marina simply because I could defend through some of the corners, but even with me defending as hard as I possibly could, the FXX still found a way past, and over the course of the lap, it will be quick, and that is at Yas Marina, a track that is pretty well suited to the 1-1, a twistier circuit, and yeah, the Ferrari will demolish it. It's not by a tremendous amount. You saw that the Top Gear lap times and so on. The 1-1 can give the Ferrari some worries, but it is only little worries, to be honest. The Ferrari is a superior car around a track. The brakes on that FXXK are incredible. It gets stopped so quickly that, yeah, through a circuit, it is by far the best car here. And then when it comes to a straight line, well, there is only one winner in that. The Koenigsegg 1-1 is far quicker than the other two. It was worrying some high-performance drag cars, sort of purpose-built drag cars with as much power and less weight than that 1-1. It was giving them a run for their money there. So, yeah, straight line speed, the 1-1 is incredible. You know, you saw the 0 to 200 to 0 test. While I suspect the Ferrari got from 200 to 0 a little bit quicker than the 1-1, getting to the 200, yeah, the Koenigsegg is always going to win that. So in terms of a straight line speed car, the Koenigsegg would be victorious. But here's the thing. You see, you can take the race tyres off and put some road tyres back on the 1-1, and that is a perfectly legal road car. The Ferrari and McLaren, you can't do. They're track-only vehicles. Admittedly, there is the McLaren P1 LM that's a road-legal version of the GTR. Unfortunately, I don't have that to play around with, though, in Forza. But, yeah, the 1-1, let's not forget, is a road-legal car racing up against the two track monsters. I still think that is a mighty impressive feat from the 1-1 to be able to compete in the manner it does against that FXXK. And at the end of the day, you can put road tyres on and it'll be perfectly legal to drive around the road. Probably quite scary, but still, yeah, it is one hell of a car. However, that is going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.